today we're just going to talk about one simple subject, a short subject, and that is the Seiken, the fist, and how to make the fist and how to correctly shape the fist. The reason I wanted to do that was because a good friend of mine, who's actually a fourth dan and who has very, very good karate, asked me some questions about kata and so on, and um, the importance of shaping the correct fist came up. There's a beautiful quote by a Japanese karate 10th dan named Nakamura Hideo. He's very famous and he's very, very uh, brilliant in many ways. And he said in Japanese, "Kitae nukareta kobushi wa sono shunkan tekko ni naru." In other words, at the moment, at the instant of impact, the trained fist is like steel. And it really is. I believe they've done tests over the years and they look at creating the fist and putting it through certain blocks and bricks and so on. And it almost defies science, logic, physics that a fist, which is made of flesh and bone, can go through something like concrete so easily. It's interesting, isn't it?
It's very interesting.
And when you look at over the years, you look at Sosai and the hand conditioning. I think hand conditioning's using the Makiwara and the different versions of the Makiwara. So when I say Makiwara, I'm not referring just to the rice straw Makiwara originating in Okinawa, which is a brilliant, innovative, very plyometric style of training. We also used to use bags of sand and also trees. We in Australia we're blessed with the Melaleuca tree, which is probably the most perfect Makiwara tree you can get. It's got a very rock hard, solid core, but it has a very soft outer paper bark. So it's really good for hand conditioning over the years. So the fist, the Seiken, the fist in Japanese is Seiken, which literally means the correct fist. Okay, that tells you everything you need to know. A punch with the hand is not a fist. Closing the fingers is not a fist. Making the fist is a very specific technical thing. Yes, and so we wanted to talk about that today. The thing is, different people have different approaches to the fist. I'm thinking particularly of people who train with gloved hands.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Kickboxers and boxers in particular who have hand wraps and then have gloves. It's so foreign to a lot of us people here in karate and Kyokushin specifically. In all my life, I don't ever remember anyone wrapping their hands. And we wore gloves, some thin ones, bag gloves, just so that we didn't
protect the skin.
So it didn't through many rounds. But apart from that, it was just you don't wrap. So what's your thoughts on that?
Over the years, we've had a lot of boxers and kickboxers come and join us in the karate club. And of course, if you were to train from the very beginning by wrapping the hands and putting a glove on, well, then you have a bias towards that. You wrap the hands properly and it protects the hands. But the thing is, even with wrapped hands, that you squeeze your fist as much as you can, that you can only get the fist in as tight as to a certain point. The problem is then you take the wraps off and the glove off and you hit something with a bare fist, and the chances of you hurting your hand aren't just good, they're out of this world.
They're great
because of the movement.
And just a question, with the wraps, I haven't wrapped my hands enough to know, do they wrap the wrist as well to lock in the wrist? Because that's another thing not wrapping, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, that's all part of it as well. That, they would, when you put the gloves on especially, you'd wrap tape around the wrist to stiffen the wrist. Okay, and a good fist makes it very hard to bend the wrist if you do it properly. An interesting thing that we found is when boxers and kickboxers would come and train with us and take the wraps off and learn how to make a fist karate style and start to train with that, when they put the wraps back on, they would often say that it felt even stronger than it was before. So I think that no wrap style of training to get used to how to hold a fist properly is actually really, really good. The primary objective of a tight fist, well, maybe not the primary objective, but one of the primary objectives is to tighten the hand and squeeze all the blood out. You know when that's happening because when you make a fist, everything goes white. Your hand kind of different parts of your hand go white. So the blood in your hand is movement in your hand. If there's blood flowing through your hand, your hands are soft. But when you tighten the fist properly, nothing moves. It's strong and tight. So when you hit something properly, nothing moves. Literally, it's when Nakamura Hideo Sensei said, the trained fist in the instant of impact is like steel. That's what it means. Nothing gives. That is one of the aspects of a proper fist that a lot of people in the fight game don't necessarily understand. Over the years, I trained my hands a fair bit with Makiwara and so on, and I did it in a way that suited me. Everyone's a little different. I think I've got a video online.
It's somewhere. A great video. It's on your YouTube page. Yes. Here. It's fantastic.
When you train your hands, it's really, really important to start carefully and slowly and build up over time. Because if you don't, the chance of injury is very, very high. Okay. And that means if you go to that video online that I've done on the fist, give you a very good progressive approach to training the fist without necessarily causing yourself any damage. So many people hurt their hand training Makiwara and so on. I talk about this in the video. There's the link I just sent. You can go and have a look at that. And I go through a process. And if you're working to train the fist, you have to think clearly about what you're doing with the fist. Okay, so the primary objective of training is to strengthen the connective tissue and thicken and harden the bones so that when there is impact, the chances of injury are much, much less. And this is why, for example, footy players, do you think their bones are thicker and harder than the average bloke?
Of course they are. The bone density is increased because of the stress that they've repeatedly put on their bodies over decades and years of training.
They're like a car crash every weekend.
Every weekend.
And their body is just like our fist becomes when you train Makiwara. Okay, so how do you form the fist? Well, like I said, there's probably different people have different approaches, but what I teach my students is this. You start with, and this, by the way, is how Sorsai taught me. You start from the pinky and you close with the thumb and you squeeze everything tight so that everything goes hard and white. There's no movement. You don't want to be like this so that there's movement. You don't want to have any of that movement. What you need to do is get the hand, this here, according to the palm readers, is the heart line. So you get your fingertips above the heart line and squeeze in tight and then close off with the thumb. Now, doing that, I swear, also helps to keep your hands fairly flexible. Start with a little finger. Close with the thumb. And the third thing is to make sure that the wrist is integrated. So in other words, not like that, kind of thing. The truth of the matter is, if your fist is perfectly straight, this is just from my personal observation, I found if my fist is perfectly straight, when you hit something really hard with speed, it tends to buckle. But if you take your wrist, I'm going to hold it next, so it's slightly, ever so slightly up. So it's not dead straight, but it's almost dead straight, just a slight 2 or 3 millimeter elevation. When you do that, then when you hit, the bones then are centered at the point of the Seiken, so that, from my experience, it doesn't seem to buckle as much. Okay, work on that fist. Follow the program as provided on that video. Marco, I've always wondered about why boxers don't train to condition their hands. This is I agree with you. Boxer, the famous story of Iron Mike Tyson, one of the greatest of all time, hitting Mitch Green in the street fight and broke his hand. Again, I agree. I believe when we condition all our bodies properly over time, we also condition our mind, attitude too. Yeah, Well, I think Shingi Tai, you shouldn't focus on one and lose the balance of the other. That's a fair call. And I know if you're serious about Makiwara, if you're serious about any consistent training, it's a mental effort more than the physical. The body, the mind leads the body. The mind wields the muscles, as Yogananda says. Exactly as Sensei Mike is saying, you can't form the correct fist without also forming the correct mind. It's just impossible to separate the two. And uh, the Seiken, the Japanese kanji for the correct fist, in a way, that is also a metaphor for the mind as well. So that's a good point, Sensei. Now here's the catch. Because martial arts, particularly things like karate and so on, spend so much time never actually hitting anyone really hard or hitting people at angles or hitting anything, what happens is the fist changes. So you'll see people, for example, do a kata. Instead of the fist being like that, it'll start to tip down, for example. I always used to use the idea that I had a puddle of mercury on the back of my hand. And my fist, when I do a kata, it has to be so that the mercury doesn't run off one side or the other.
Really clever.
Because if your hand tips, the mercury is going to run off if the hand tips too much. So sometimes you can throw the punch and finish with your hand like that. And it feels good, but it's wrong. It feels great. And another thing too is you see them that they kind of punch the fist out like that. They put that knuckle in like that. And the fist is all wonky. And I know it's all wonky and it might feel good, look good, but the problem is because of the shape of the hand, you will literally hurt your hand if you hit anything. Okay. Sai said, start with a little finger, squeeze with the thumb, make sure the wrist is straight, and here's the key: the body weight. We strike with the Seiken, but the body weight is centered between the little finger and the ring finger, like a triangle back there. So that's basically where the body weight is centered. Now, this is really funky. That's really, really interesting. It's like saying, it's also saying when the hand goes up, the thumb's on the ring, the base of the ring finger. When it goes across, it's on the middle finger. Well, that you can only say that through experience, and it's the same with the Seiken. When Sosai says the correct Seiken has the body weight centered here, it makes so much sense because that confirms that the correct fist is formed. And Sosai also said something you were talking about it before about the Yakuza.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, that's a great story that you said.
Yeah.
I'd love you to share it.
Well, I mean, yeah, Sosai once said he just loves, Yakuza have a very strict code of honor. And if one of them does something that breaks that honor, if it's serious enough, they'll chop their little finger off as a sign of uh, repentance. Sorso used to say he loves it when they do that because if they chop the little finger off, they can no longer make a good fist. And he was serious about it. If you take if you try and make a fist without the little finger, so just let the little finger wander down there and try and squeeze the fist, and you can't do it.
Really odd.
So yeah, so you need that little finger to squeeze in super tight to make the fist correct. So to reiterate, start with the little finger, close with the thumb, make sure the wrist is straight, place the body weight between the ring finger and the little finger there. Place the body weight there, and when you squeeze, you should squeeze all the blood out of your fist.
That body weight behind the ring finger and the pinky, that would also help alleviate the condition you said before, where sometimes you see that because you pit with the first two knuckles. So that might make people think that that's where all the energy goes, but it's not. That would having the body weight between those far two knuckles would square the fist up naturally.
Exactly. I think everything about it is that to get the correct fist, if your body weight isn't centered there, everything changes. And this notion where people go one and poke that sort of thing, where they poke the forefinger out, down like that, and open the little finger. This is very common with guys that have never been taught how to do a correct fist. They think the Seiken, just like you said, because you strike here, nothing else matters. And so the little finger pokes out. And so you'll see guys, sometimes the little finger will be floating. You don't even have to be a genius to see that it's floating. From the front, sometimes it doesn't even look like it's floating. But the difference is significant when you look at it from the side. It has to be tight because the little finger ties everything up tightly. So,
and what point of the karate journey do you think people need to focus on that?
From day
one.
Yeah. I wouldn't advise children to do Makiwara training, of course, because they still have ligament and not enough bone, and they're going to damage their hands and permanently disfigure them. The other thing about Makiwara training too is I don't believe in the necessity for like bruised knuckles and black knuckles and things like that. Some people see it as a sign, and perhaps it's a symptom of certain types of training. There's no doubt about that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's making your fist any better.
It's not the goal.
No, the goal is to strengthen the connective tissue and the density, make the density of the bone thicker. So if you follow that YouTube video where I've talked about Makiwara training, the way I was taught, you train shuto, palm heel, haito, and back fist. So when you look at that, you got back fist, knife hand, palm, there. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4. So you're working your hand 1, 2, 3. You're working the hand all the way around it. And the actual fists become less important. So if you follow that video, you'll see that the volume of knife hand, back fist, haito, and shote is very important. But the Seiken volume is less, simply because the whole idea is to strengthen the hand around so that the fist becomes stronger. But you're not going to get the fist stronger by striking all the time like this. Yeah, you've got to, it's a little bit like Kihon. The Kihon of a correct fist is conditioning the hand all around the hand, like that, and squeezing the little finger and coming over with the fist. In kata, you'll often see people, they'll go with the hand down or the little finger will be out and things like that. Got my Frank t-shirt. Shout out to my good buddy Frank Trigg. We were talking about you today at training, Frank, and they were good memories of when I used to train with Randy Couture, Dan Henderson, and Frank Trigg, the Raw Boys with Rico Ciparelli. What a great team they were.
What an amazing room to be in.
Yeah,
my gosh.
Exactly. I have numerous physiological imperfections
that continue
as evidence
yeah.
of my training with them.
And great experiences too.
Yeah,
techniques and skills.
Yeah, indeed. I compare it like you take a bullet, take a 44 Magnum bullet, or even a high-powered sniper rifle bullet, and you stand 5 meters away and you throw it as hard as you can at someone, and provided you don't hit them in the eye or the face or anything, they're just going to giggle because it'll bounce right off. So clearly the destructive power is not in the bullet, it's in the bore of the rifle and the gunpowder and so on. So it's the same when you do the Seiken, but the bullet has to be able to withstand the force that is generated. You can't shoot a foam bullet and expect it to do any damage. Well, it's the same with the Seiken. You train the Seiken to be able to handle the amount of energy that a well-trained body can generate. I think that's really important. In kata or kion, she would always keep the hand closed. I see some hands, some open hand after throw a punch. That's a good point too. You mean they go this sort of thing. It's a bad habit. If you did that at Hondu under Solsai, he'd wrap you on the knuckles and he'd let you know. You keep your hand closed. The squeezing the hand tight, and when you're fighting, of course, you're kind of, your hand's relaxed. And then when you hit on impact, that's when everything tightens. Okay, but sometimes that's kind of hard. So it's also okay to keep the hands a little tight.
What you just said there, the rhythm. I've personally found that doing obviously pad work and bag work, but also Makiwara is so important for that, because you think, certainly me, I'm thinking I'm going to hit the Makiwara, but I realize my tension's just terrible. If I haven't hit the Makiwara in a while or anything like that, it's just, I think, I've got to learn to relax more or contract at the right time. It's a real timing thing.
I go over that video. If you get on that video, have a look. I go over the importance of closing the waki. Everything comes from the core, and the technique by closing the waki actually comes almost through the lat like that, because often the shoulder tenses up as you do it. Boom. And that takes a few to get to the point where it's down. Okay. But that's another reason why you concentrate the weight here, because if you concentrate the weight here, it's very easy to lift the elbow. See that? If you think, if my weight is concentrated here, I tip over. I'm exaggerating, but you get the point. Whereas if my weight is concentrated in the little finger, I don't tip over. I keep it square. It's a really, really important point to remember. If you open the hand with tension, I tend to too on the Makiwara. I tend to relax a little bit. That's true. Also, with the Makiwara, when you hit it really hard, you actually get a friction heat build up, so that the Makiwara would heat up. So I used to throw a bit of water on it sometimes as well to cool it down. But the main thing that's important is the importance of keeping the fist straight. Don't let it tip. A lot of people, you see them when they throw their hands at an angle like that, they haven't quite turned it over. But if you're turning it over correctly and your weight is here, you'll turn it over too far. If the weight is here where it should be, then you'll relax, close the waki, relax the shoulder. And if you look at some photos of Solso and he's throwing the fist, it's exactly down like that really nicely. The other thing is, be careful. It all starts with the little finger. If you don't start with the little finger, if you start with the forefinger, that's what happens. Little finger comes out. So it's vital that you start with little finger, close with the thumb. Hands. I remember Jeff Fennick breaking his hands numerous times because their hands, because they wrap all the time and wear gloves, they never develop the thickness. The bone density is never changed to any big degree. So that's really, really important.
And when you think about it, they're some of the hardest punches in the world too, because they've got boots on, boxing shoes on, so they got the grip and the traction and so on. So it's,
For Kihon, I think it's important to note that the Mako is not used solely to build a strong punch, but distance, weight transfer, and the roll 100%. I'm glad you said that. You're an oracle, Mike. I'll teach you how to spell that word one day. But what Sensei Mike's saying is so true. I remember in my experience with Makiwara, the impact of the hand on the Makiwara became less critical, became a minor detail. My focus then became balancing the weight. Where was my weight on the feet? How did I generate power off the ground? Where was my core, and how was my shoulder and the structure and everything relaxed? Was the distance correct? Because if your distance is wrong, you're going to get it wrong. How did I transfer my weight off the ground, through the leg, through the lat, the waki, the elbow, and the hand? So that's really, really important. This is where a lot of people think that the whole idea of the Makiwara is to give yourself big knuckles. So you see them hitting there, and they're just hitting away like this while they're reading a magazine or watching TV or something like that.
But that's got to be some sort of ego-based training. That's really nice, because they're just trying to signal that I've done, rather than actually develop something useful.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes they are completely misled to think that that's what they have to do. From Keon, I've seen twisting of the fist from Hikite and the last minute twisting of the fist before impact. Model crows do it differently. Good question. Okay, so some people will throw the punch, bang, which is incorrect. And you'll see them, they'll go. And when they exaggerate it, this is what starts to happen. Because when you turn the hand from the start, you open the waki, elevate the shoulder. Sorsai said that 90% of the problems we face in karate are related to excessive tension in the shoulders. Isn't that interesting? Too much tension in the shoulder. The correct way to do it is close the waki, hand there, and then twist at the end. Even a good boxer will tell you it's called carving the face right at the end. right on the point of impact. You get that twist. Okay, so there, twist at the very end, twist at the end, twist at the end. That's worth breaking it down to develop that habit. That's a really good question.
You've told a story before about Solsai as he was older and just looking at his fist.
Yes. Solsai, once one of Solsai's daughters walked into Solsai's bedroom, and he was lying in bed just making a fist and looking at his fist. And he looked up and he saw his daughter, and he kind of smiled embarrassed. He said, even after 60 years of karate, I'm still not 100% certain that I know how to make the perfect fist, that I can still make the perfect fist. And this is Solsai, who was labeled by journalists as the Godhand, So that's an interesting thing. In other words, the pursuit of the perfection of the fist never dies. You keep doing that over the years. It's really important. Shukokai karate often develop very powerful punch using foam pads. Can I just say something there? That reminds me of another Solsai story. Solsai stopped using Makiwara.
Around 40, right?
Yeah, around 40 years old. And the reason he did that was because he understood that kinetic energy, and that is the amount of impact energy you can create through movement, is above all a matter of speed. The correct formula for kinetic energy is half mass times velocity squared. Right? So, in other words, if you double the mass, for all intents and purposes, you double your body weight, you double the power. But if you double the speed, you quadruple the kinetic energy. So that's really important to recognize that Makiwara can slow you down. It's training to unless you're extremely careful, and even then, it'll border on training the slow twitch fibers more than the fast twitch fibers. And this is why boxers have such devastating power in their punches, because they're fast, because of the speed, because of the kinetic energy. So when Sensei Mike says that Shukokai often develop very powerful punch using foam pads, Solsai went away from using Makiwara and started to use speedballs, hitting pieces of paper, trying to tear the paper, blowing candles out. In other words, all the things that he was doing then was speed, developing speed.
That said principle we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Specific adaptation imposed demand.
Yes. So your body will adapt specifically to the demand you impose upon it. If you work Makiwara, it will slow you down. And this is according to Solsai. And that's why he stopped doing Makiwara at around 40 years old. And after that, he worked on his speed. Perhaps it was also an awareness that as he was getting older, he was slowing down.
Yeah, it's a biological fact.
Yes.
We do break down.
Yeah. So he needed to make sure that he did everything he could to maintain that super speed. Getting clarity. Remember, the finer the detail, the clearer the process. Getting clarity about how to form a fist. Start with the little finger. Close with the thumb. Make sure the wrist is straight. Remember, slightly above in my book is better than slightly below, definitely. Like that. You have to condition the hand. Place the body weight here, even though you strike here. Okay. And the training will help you. A tight fist will also reduce the tendency for the wrist to bend. It's much harder to bend the wrist when it's tight, very easy to bend it when it's relaxed. Thank you for your input. Guys, once again, please subscribe, hit the little bell. If you like what you see, please encourage me and Mitch to keep coming back, and we will keep coming back.
Thank you for sharing all this. This is wonderful stuff.
Yeah, I hope you got something out of that. It's really important. The correct fist is not falling down on the side. It's not there. It's not here. The correct fist is little finger tight, close with the thumb, fist and wrist and ankle. A wrist is straight, weight here. Do your research and do your Makiwara training so that you feel the correct way to make a fist. If your little finger's poking out, video yourself doing kata. Ask someone to review your kata. Don't let the little finger float, and don't let the forefinger tip forward like that. They're all very common errors. Good to see you. Mitch and I trained. This is our second get together today. We trained together at lunchtime as well. It's always fun.
Always.
Yep. We'll see you next week. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thanks for coming along. Us.